This is the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah Simin Vav Sif Aleph. And we begin a new simin today in which the headline, as always, written by Rav Yosef Kairei, the Mechaber himself, says, Din Birchas Ashar Yatzar V'Lakay Neshama Upeirushav. That we're going to be discussing in this simin a few days long the halachas of the bracha of Ashar Yatzar, which we make when we finish using the bathroom, and Elokay Neshama. And the third element, Upeirushav, we're as well going to be discussing the Peirushim, the explanation of the brachas, which of course already gives us a little bit of a detail into the uniqueness of these halachas, that it's not only going to be the halachas of Ashar Yatzar and Elokay Neshama, but as well as we're going to be getting the explanations, which teaches us the importance of the explanations of these brachas and all brachas as well. So says the Mechaber, when someone leaves the bathroom, he should make the bracha Ashar Yatzar es ha'adam. You should make this bracha Ashar Yatzar b'chachma, with wisdom. And now explains the Mechaber, and really today, most of the shir today is going to be explaining phrase by phrase this bracha of Ashar Yatzar. So says the Mechaber, beginning that what does it mean Ashar Yatzar es ha'adam b'chachma, that Hashem created man with wisdom. Says the Mechaber, Shebriyas ha'adam, the creation of man, he b'chachma nifla, was with wonderful wisdom. As we turn over the page, continues the Mechaber in explaining, what is this wonderful wisdom? There's some that explain that it's because the body is filled like a flask filled with air, and filled with holes, as we're going to explain further on. So either the creation itself was wonderful, or it's the creation has these many openings, which we'll see in a moment is as well a wonder. Or number three, v'yesh mevarshim, B'chachma, what's the wisdom? She'ezkin mizaynet shel Adam Rishon, Hashem prepared the mizaynet, the sustenance of Adam Rishon, va'achar kach, and only after the sustenance was prepared, Barai, Hashem created Adam Rishon. And that is a phrase number one of Ashar Yatzar. So three different ways of explaining what is the chachma, whether it was within the creation, the entirety of man, whether it is referring to the flasks of organs that are filled with air, or number three, whether it's referring to the fact that Hashem first created the sustenance, that which could sustain the food for Adam Rishon, and then created man himself. And then Ashar Yatzar continues and explains the Mechaber, Ubara by Nikavim Nikavim, Chalulim Chalulim, and created in man were Nikavim Nikavim, this double language in which the Mishnah Berurah in a moment is going to explain. Nikavim Nikavim, openings, Chalulim Chalulim, hollow organs. Pirush explains the Mechaber already himself. Nikavim Rabim, and many openings, the mouth, the nose, and the area you use the bathroom, and as well as Hashem created. Eivarim Rabim, many limbs, Chalulim, that are hollow, Kamoi, for example, leave the heart, Karim, the stomach, Umeayim, and the intestines. And even before we go into the wonder of this creation, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah just points out that which we just said, that Chalulim Pirush, Eivarim Chalulim, limbs that are hollow. And we should not say that what it refers to is Chalalim, it just means hollows. The there is no creation of just a hollow, rather refers to the hollow organs. And comes along the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber, and he continues that the Ashar Yatzar continues, if one of them were closed. And of course we know continues, two different phrases. So first explains the Mechaber, what's the Yisasim Echad Miyam if one of them was closed? Kalaymar, meaning to say, if there was one, that in the openings of the body, there is one opening, which is the mouth. That when the baby is in the mother's womb in the embryonic stage, the mouth is closed. And when the baby comes out to the world at the wonderful moment of a birth, the mouth is opened up. And at that moment, and if when the baby comes to the world, the mouth would remain closed. The baby would not be able to survive even 1 moment, 1 hour. So the first explanation of what it refers to when we say in the bracha of Yisasei Mechon Miyam is that it refers to the moment of creation, the opening of the mouth, the wonderful creation that if it were not to have been opened, the person would not be able to survive. Ve'varim hachalulim, and the hollow limbs, if one of them were opened, similarly, if an opening in the body that's not meant to be open was opening, that as well, they would not be able to have a surviving to the body. I feel even 1 moment. Another way of explaining what this phrase means. Last time, there's a boundary, there's a kavul, that the body could live being closed, and now the Machaber is addressing an obvious question, that what do you mean? There are moments in time that a person could survive if limbs and organs stay closed for a certain period of time. So says the Machaber, that's true. If it was closed for a certain period of time, I agree with you. But when that period of time finishes, then after that moment, whatever that boundary is, at that moment you were never able to survive anymore. Now he comes to address, why are we honing in on this detail when we say Ashar Yatzar? What does this have to do with using the bathroom? So says the Machaber, because within the openings of the body is the Biyat Abbas and the Biyat Mama, the areas to urinate and to let out all fecal matter, and included in the hollow openings, that if one of them were opened, it would not be able to live, is what? Is the stomach and the intestines. Are these openings that if there was an extra hole, they would not be able to survive? It makes a lot of sense to say this while we're giving praise and blessing over being able, the ability of Asiyas Rachav to use the bathroom. Continues the Machaber, it's possible to explain if someone really needs to use the bathroom, it's a possibility that if that amount of time would pass, he would pass on. That there is a gvul, there is a boundary that the feces have to be removed from the body. And therefore it's concluded that Hashem has to open up. Opening the body is also included in the Asiyas Rachav, the doing one's bodily functions. And continues the Machaber, what's Roifei Chol Basar. We continue in the Ashar Yatzar that we say the Roifei Kol Basar, Roifei Choyle Kol Basar, as the Machaber the Mishnah Berurah will explain in a moment. Al Shem Shanekavim Shabara Bai, that these openings that Hashem created to get rid of the waste, machal of our food, that if the food will remain inside the stomach, Yamos would cause a person to perish, and therefore the removal of that food, the removal itself is rafuah, meaning the Machaber is explaining now why we use the word of roife, healing to get rid of the waste, because if the waste were to stay, it could cause damage. Umafli lasais, in the final phrase, the wonderful creation, the body is like a flask full of air, that if there's one little hole in this body, the spirit will leave, and the body is full with holes. Even though we have all these openings in the body, the ruach, the spirit, the soul, stays within the body. That's a wonder. So that is what we're honing in and blessing at the end of Ashar Yatzar. Another way of explaining, so what's the mafli lasais? In that we choose the good, and the body expels the waste. The digestive system's incredible ability to separate the good from the waste is what we hone in on when we say a mafli lasais. Says the Ramah, another explanation of mafli lasais. Shemafli lasais mashashem ruach adam mikirbai, that we are able to hold within ourselves the ruach, the spirit. That what is this referred to? Says the Ramah, fascinating idea. V'koisher davar ruchni b'davar gashmi, that Hashem has the ability to be koisher, to tie, to intrinsically connect the davar ruchni, a spiritual matter, with the davar gashmi, with our physical bodies. V'akolu ayedei ruach kol basar, and how is this all done? Because Hashem is the Rafi kol basar, the healer of all souls, all flesh. Because Adam bekav abri is a person on the line of health, and the shvasa b'shameres b'kirbai, the neshama is within him. Divrei atzmei, those are the words of the Ramah. And now we have a few short Mishnah Berurahs that come to explain a little bit more about the bracha of Ashar Yatzar, Sivkot and Beishim Yisaseim. Kenu Gersa is a Rambam. Aval Gersa Shlanu, what is our Gersa of a Rashi Rif Rosh? That in Yipasech HaKoidim says, and that's the guy, and that's how we do it, most people do, is first it's in Yipasech HaChamim, and then it's Yisaseim HaChamim. Sivkat and Gimel, Klaimer Shem Nekavim, Shem the Gersasa, Yevshel is came of Ilusha Achaz, because he had the Gersa of Yevshel, that's what the Machaber is explaining. And the Machaber found it difficult. Adam says in Beva Arbe Shalis. Person, you could close your mouth for a very long time and still live. And on this detail it says Kalaimar, meaning to say, of course we know the word Kalaimar, for all those who learned off Yomi, Rashi often uses Kalaimar means, it's not the simple explanation, but rather Kalaimar, meaning to say, and not simple explanation, not the literal translation. We do not say Afilu Shachas, so I go to Magen Avram, Rambam, and Bir Agra all say not to say not to say Afilu Shachas V'ayin Taz, which the Taz explains there are those with the minhag, which many people do, and they can continue such a minhag. Sivkat and Daladi Efsher, E is Bitseire, A Efsher. Why Tachas Aleph? Ki Amila Nigzer is a min Ein, because the word comes to the word Ein. The Ashar Yatzar comes along and explains, no, we could say E Efsher with a chirik. Shagam King Avanos like Kamoy Ein, because the Kavana is like Ein, not Kamoy Dechsev E Kavod. The word E Kavod refers to Shabir Shusham Kavanos like Kamoy Ein Kavod. That the word we could say E Kavod meaning Ein Kavod, which so we could have the gears of E, which many people say. And it still refers to the lack of the E kavod, the E afshar, that it's impossible. Says the Mishnah Berurah of Katan Hey Rovi Cholei Kol Basar, the Bach and the Shalom Ata Moshe Kasu Shein Leimer Cholei, which of course that's what we say. Rak Rovi Kol Basar. But again, the Taz Kasu Shein Gersas in the Chaynais, both Gersas are correct. The Chalil Limchuk Achs Memayin Sham, do not erase one of them. There are people that indeed say Rovi Kol Basar Davar Rochni. Says that the Mishnah Berurah of Katan Vav, referring to the Davar Ruchni, the line of the Ramah, that the Ramah said that what's the Mafli Lasois? The Mafli Lasois is the wonderful neshama within us, that is the intrinsic connection between a spiritual entity of a neshama that comes from underneath the Kisei HaKavod and heavenly throne, and is within the physical body. Says the Mishnah Berurah, B'Kavanais, referring to the Arizal, and the Kavanais Kosav writes, that the soul gets benefit from the spiritual element of food, V'Agov, and the body gets benefit from the physical entity of food. And they're both intrinsically tied through food, which of course teaches us an incredible idea that the food that we eat itself has a spiritual component to it. Perhaps it's via the bracha that we make, but the food itself has a physical element which gives us the nourishment that our body so needs. But there's also the spiritual element which is giving us the sustenance to our neshama. That entity that comes from Hashem Himself, from the Kisei HaKavod, is nourished from our bodies, from the food that we eat. And we'll pick it up from Sev Beis, B'siyata Dishmaya, in the next year.